Attention! Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of the United States. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the autumn of 1852, a weathered leather journal was discovered hidden behind a loose stone in the cellar wall of the Blackwood estate. The journal belonged to Dr. Edwin Blackwood, a once respected physician whose reputation had long since faded into whispers. The handwriting on those yellowed pages grew increasingly erratic toward the final entries, but what they revealed would never find its way into the county records. According to William Porter, the courthouse clerk who first examined the journal, the contents were deemed too disturbing for public knowledge and were promptly sealed by order of Judge Hamilton Rutherford. The Blackwood property stood at the end of Willow Creek Road, approximately 5 miles outside of Millfield, Virginia. The main house was a 2-story Georgian structure built in the late 1700s by Edwin's grandfather, a tobacco merchant who had acquired considerable wealth during the colonial period. By 1845, when our account begins, the estate had fallen into disrepair. The white paint peeled from its exterior walls, and ivy had begun to reclaim the eastern facade. Local residents would often take the longer route into town rather than pass directly by the Blackwood gates. What happened within those walls would remain largely unknown until 1868, when a fire destroyed much of the estate's east wing. It was during the subsequent restoration efforts that workers discovered a hidden room behind the library. The dimensions of this room, 7 feet by 12 feet, were meticulously documented by the county surveyor. What the surveyor failed to include in his official report, however, were the scratch marks that covered the interior walls. The Blackwood family had once been prominent in Virginia society. Edwin had studied medicine at the University of Pennsylvania and returned to his family estate in 1839. His wife, Margaret Wilson Blackwood, came from a respected Charleston family. She was known for her quiet demeanor and rarely appeared at social functions. Between 1840 and 1842, Margaret gave birth to twin daughters. The local midwife, Sarah Jenkins, was present at the birth, but refused to speak of it publicly for the remainder of her life. In her personal diary, discovered after her death in 1865, she wrote only, "May God forgive me for what I witnessed in that house and for my silence thereafter." The Blackwood twins were never seen in public. When questioned, Dr. Blackwood would explain that they suffered from a delicate constitution that required them to remain indoors. Church records confirm the baptism of twin girls named Elizabeth and Catherine Blackwood in April 1842. Though the ceremony was conducted privately at the estate, rather than at the Millfield Episcopal Church, where the family had a designated pew, county tax records from 1845 indicate that Dr. Blackwood owned 7 enslaved persons. Their names appear in the ledger as Samuel, Joseph, Thomas, William, Henry, Jacob, and Daniel. The ages listed for Samuel and Joseph, both 22, suggest they may have been twins, though this detail was not explicitly noted. What is clear from surviving documents is that Dr. Blackwood paid significantly more for these 2 men than was typical for the region, suggesting they possess some value beyond their labor capacity. The events that would later become known as the Blackwood Incident began to unfold in the winter of 1849, when Dr. Blackwood abruptly dismissed all household staff except for the enslaved persons he owned. Martha Collins, who had served as housekeeper for 15 years, later reported to her cousin that she had been ordered to leave after overhearing sounds no Christian should ever hear, coming from the sealed east wing of the house. Her letter, preserved in the Millfield Historical Society archives, describes the doctor speaking in hushed tones about the procedure and preparation for the ceremony. In January 1850, Margaret Blackwood's brother, James Wilson, arrived unexpectedly from Charleston. According to statements given by Joseph Miller, the owner of Millfield's only inn, Mr. Wilson appeared deeply troubled and insisted on seeing his sister despite Dr. Blackwood's refusal to receive visitors. The confrontation that followed was witnessed by Thomas Green, a local carpenter who was repairing a fence near the property. In his statement to the sheriff, Green described seeing Mr. Wilson forcibly removed from the estate by two men he assumed were the doctor's slaves. 3 days later, James Wilson's horse was found wandering along the Petersburg Road, but Wilson himself was never seen in Millfield again. The Charleston Courier published a brief notice in February 1850 stating that businessman James Wilson had gone missing during a trip to visit family in Virginia. The notice requested any information regarding his whereabouts, but no follow-up article ever appeared. When Charleston authorities contacted Millfield's sheriff, they were informed that Mr. Wilson had departed the area after a brief visit. Destination unknown. Dr. Blackwood's journal entries from this period reveal an increasing preoccupation with what he called the anatomical uniqueness of his daughters. While he never explicitly described their condition, medical historians who have examined the text believe he was referring to some form of conjoined twinning. In one entry dated March 3, 1850, he wrote, "Their connection presents both a remarkable scientific curiosity and an unprecedented opportunity. What God has joined together can indeed be put asunder, but perhaps there exists a more perfect solution, one that serves both science and necessity." The spring of 1850 brought unusually heavy rainfall to central Virginia. The creek that ran behind the Blackwood property flooded twice, washing away part of the garden wall. It was during repairs to this wall that a stone mason named Frederick Thompson discovered a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be human hair of two distinct colors, one auburn, one dark brown, tied together with silk thread. Thompson presented this find to Reverend Michael Scott of the Millfield Episcopal Church, who later claimed to have burned the item after determining it had pagan significance. In his sermon on April 7, 1850, Reverend Scott spoke at length about unnatural practices and ungodly experimentation, though he never mentioned the Blackwood family by name. Church attendance records indicate that Dr. Blackwood was present for this sermon, the last time he would appear in public until the events of September. The summer months passed with little record of activity at the Blackwood estate. Deliveries of food and supplies continued to be left at the gate, but no one was permitted beyond this point. The only exception was Dr. James Harrison, a former medical school colleague of Blackwood's, who visited twice in July. In a letter to his wife, discovered among his personal effects after his death in 1859, Harrison wrote, "I can scarce believe what Edwin intends. He speaks of joining what nature had already joined, but in a manner most perverse. I have advised against this course, but fear my counsel falls on deaf ears." The girls, now 8 years of age, show signs of understanding their father's intentions, and their silent terror is more than I can bear to witness. On August 15, 1850, several residents of Millfield reported hearing screams coming from the direction of the Blackwood estate. Sheriff William Davis and 2 deputies rode out to investigate, but were turned away at the gate by Dr. Blackwood, who explained that his wife was suffering from female hysteria and was under sedation. The sheriff, having no warrant and seeing no immediate cause for alarm, did not press the issue. This decision would later be the subject of much criticism when the full extent of events became known. The journal entries from late August reveal Dr. Blackwood's detailed preparations for what he termed the unification ceremony. He wrote of selecting Samuel and Joseph from among his slaves because they too shared the bond of twin birth, though without the physical connection that nature bestowed upon my daughters. He described administering various compounds to all 4 young people, though he used coded language for the specific substances. Medical historians believe these likely included laudanum, ether, and possibly other experimental sedatives available to physicians of that era. On September 1st, 1850, Dr. Blackwood sent a letter to the county clerk requesting that 2 marriage licenses be prepared. The clerk, finding this request unusual, given that the Blackwood daughters were only 8 years old, sought clarification. The doctor's response, preserved in county archives, claimed that the licenses were for adult wards under my legal protection and included payment well above the standard fee. The licenses were issued as requested, though no minister's signature would ever be added to validate them. What occurred on the night of September 3rd has been pieced together from fragmented evidence. Dr. Blackwood's journal describes preparing the chamber with surgical instruments, restraints, and what he called the binding agents. He wrote of positioning the 4 young people, his conjoined daughters and the 2 enslaved twins, in an arrangement he had designed according to principles of symmetrical unification. The most disturbing passage reads, "As they are joined to each other, so shall they be joined to their husbands, forming a perfect circle of flesh. What begins as 4 shall function as 1." The journal entries become increasingly incoherent after this point. References to the procedure suggest that Dr. Blackwood attempted some form of surgical joining of all 4 individuals, though the exact nature of this operation remains mercifully unclear. What is known with certainty is that on September 4th, the doctor's wife, Margaret, somehow escaped the estate and was found wandering along the Petersburg Road in a state of extreme distress. Her clothing was soaked with blood, though she appeared physically uninjured. When finally brought to the sheriff's office, Margaret Blackwood was unable to provide a coherent account of events. She repeated only one phrase: "The circle is complete." She was subsequently transferred to Western State Hospital in Staunton, where she remained until her death in 1863. Hospital records describe her condition as incurable melancholia, with periodic episodes of violent resistance. The attending physician noted that during these episodes she would attempt to separate her hands from her wrists, claiming they belonged to someone else. Sheriff Davis, accompanied by 5 armed deputies, arrived at the Blackwood estate on the morning of September 5th. They found the main house unlocked and apparently abandoned. A thorough search revealed no trace of Dr. Blackwood, his daughters, or any of the enslaved persons. The only area they could not access was a sealed room in the east wing, the door to which had been bricked over and plastered so as to blend almost seamlessly with the surrounding wall. Given the lack of evident crime and the legal complications of destroying private property, Sheriff Davis chose not to break through this wall. This decision would be reversed in October after several residents reported seeing lights moving behind the east wing windows at night. When authorities finally breached the sealed room on October 12th, they found it completely empty. The floor had been scrubbed clean and the walls whitewashed. The only evidence that anyone had occupied the space was a circular pattern of small holes in the wooden floor, as might be made by medical restraints, and a faint copper-like smell that one deputy compared to a slaughterhouse after washing day. A subsequent search of the estate grounds yielded no human remains. The well was dragged, and several areas of recently disturbed earth were excavated, but nothing conclusive was found. A portion of the creek bank appeared to have collapsed, leading some to speculate that bodies might have been buried there and subsequently washed away by the current, but this theory could not be confirmed. Dr. Blackwood himself was never seen again, though rumors persisted for years that he had fled to Europe or South America. A man matching his description was reportedly working as a physician in Brazil in 1855, specializing in anatomical uniqueness, but Brazilian authorities could not confirm this individual's identity. The Blackwood case might have faded from public memory entirely were it not for the discovery in 1861 of a series of detailed anatomical drawings in the office of a recently deceased Philadelphia physician who had corresponded with Dr. Blackwood. These drawings, now housed in the medical archives of the University of Pennsylvania, depict what appears to be an attempt to surgically join 4 human bodies in a circular arrangement. Annotations in a handwriting matching Blackwood's describe a theory of shared circulation and unified nervous response. Modern medical experts have confirmed that such a procedure would have been fatal to all involved. In 1868, when workers discovered the hidden room behind the library during post-fire restoration, they also found a small box sealed within the wall cavity. The box contained 4 wedding bands of identical size and design, each engraved with the same date, September 3rd, 1850. According to the written account of James Edwards, the foreman who made this discovery, the rings were arranged in a perfect circle, connected by what appeared to be strands of human hair braided together. Edwards claimed that when he attempted to separate the rings, he felt a sudden chill, as though someone had placed ice against the back of my neck. The rings were later transferred to the county courthouse for preservation, but disappeared from the evidence room in 1872. The final known reference to the Blackwood case comes from an 1879 interview with Thomas Johnson, one of the enslaved persons who had been sold away from the estate just before Dr. Blackwood dismissed his staff in 1849. Johnson, then living as a free man in Massachusetts, claimed that Samuel and Joseph had confided in him their fear of the doctor's plan. According to Johnson, the twins had overheard Blackwood discussing a method by which 4 bodies could share one life. Johnson's account includes the disturbing detail that the doctor believed such an arrangement would create a perfect balance of male and female energies, sustained indefinitely through circular connection. The Blackwood estate remained abandoned for decades, falling into complete ruin by the early 1900s. In 1967, the land was purchased by a development company with plans to build a residential subdivision. During the initial excavation, workers uncovered a small underground chamber near where the east wing had stood. Inside was a circular metal container sealed with lead. The company's owner, Richard Thompson, allegedly opened this container privately before county officials arrived. He never disclosed what he found, but immediately abandoned the development project and donated the land to the county as a nature preserve, with the stipulation that no structure ever be built on the site again. Today, the area known as Blackwood Preserve remains largely untouched. Hiking trails circumnavigate the property but do not cross it. Local residents report occasionally hearing what sounds like children's voices near the old foundation stones, though only after sunset. Perhaps most disturbing are the accounts from several unrelated visitors who, without prior knowledge of the site's history, have described feeling as though someone is trying to separate my hands from my arms while passing the area where the East Wing once stood. In 1968, a graduate student named Michael Collins attempted to compile a comprehensive account of the Blackwood case for his doctoral dissertation. After 6 months of research, Collins abruptly abandoned the project and left the university. When contacted by a colleague, he explained his decision with a single sentence: "Some circles are not meant to be broken." His research notes were never found. The last official mention of the Blackwood case appears in county records from 1969, when the Historical Society attempted to place a commemorative marker at the estate site. The proposal was unanimously rejected by the county board, with the minutes stating only that some history should remain unremembered. The matter has not been raised again in any public forum. What truly happened to Elizabeth and Catherine Blackwood and the enslaved twins Samuel and Joseph may never be known with certainty. But in the sealed archives of the Virginia Historical Society, there exists a single photograph taken of the East Wing before its destruction in the 1868 fire. In the upper window, barely visible even under magnification, is what appears to be a face, or perhaps more accurately, parts of 4 faces arranged in a circular pattern, watching the world outside with a gaze that belongs to no single living being. For those who have studied this case in depth, one question remains more disturbing than all others. If Dr. Blackwood's impossible procedure somehow succeeded, not in creating a sustainable life, but in binding 4 souls together in perpetual agony, might they still exist in some form, neither living nor dead, caught in the endless circle of his making? The scratching sounds reported by visitors to the preserve over the years have been dismissed as branches against stone or animals in the underbrush. Yet those who have heard them describe a distinct pattern, 4 scratches in quick succession, repeated endlessly, as though 4 hands were trying to claw their way back to separation and freedom. In 1965, a local historian named Margaret Wilson, no relation to the doctor's wife despite sharing her name, spent one night near the ruins as part of her research. She left before dawn and refused to discuss her experience. The only record of her observations was found in her journal after her death in 1968. The final entry reads, "They still move as one. God help them, they still move as one." Perhaps the most merciful conclusion is that Dr. Edwin Blackwood's experiment failed immediately, resulting in the deaths of all involved. The alternative, that his perfect circle achieved some form of sustained existence, is too horrific to contemplate. Yet the whispers persist and the land remains undisturbed, as though the earth itself refuses to forget what transpired there in the autumn of 1850. For those who might be tempted to visit Blackwood Preserve in search of answers, consider the words carved into a tree at the property's edge, discovered in 1955 and attributed to an unknown hand. What joins cannot be severed. What is bound cannot be freed. The circle remains unbroken. Local authorities have repeatedly removed this carving, only to find it reappearing days later, the fresh cuts weeping a substance that has never been conclusively identified. Some secrets are buried too deeply to be uncovered, some histories are too dark to be illuminated, and some bonds, once formed, can never truly be broken, not by time, not by death, not even by the most determined effort to separate what has been so unnaturally joined. As for the journal of Dr. Edwin Blackwood, its current location remains unknown. The last confirmed sighting was in 1969, when a courthouse clerk claimed it had been transferred to a secure facility for preservation. No record of this transfer exists in official documents. Like so much of this tragic history, it has simply vanished, perhaps mercifully into the shadows of the past. But in the silence of Blackwood Preserve, where no bird sings and no animal makes its home, something still moves in slow, coordinated patterns. Something that breathes as one, but suffers as 4. Something that continues the endless, impossible dance of separate consciousness trapped in unified flesh, waiting perhaps for someone to complete the circle once again. In 1969, Dr. Eleanor Reynolds of the University of Virginia Department of Anthropology received an unmarked package containing a collection of aged documents. Among them was a partial transcript of an interview conducted in 1874 with a woman identified only as MJ, believed by some researchers to be Mary Jenkins, daughter of the midwife Sarah Jenkins, who had attended the birth of the Blackwood twins. The interview, conducted by a representative of the Virginia Medical Historical Society, contains disturbing details absent from other accounts. According to MJ, Her mother had confided on her deathbed that the Blackwood twins were joined at the lower spine, sharing some portion of their pelvic region but otherwise having fully formed separate bodies. The condition would have been survivable with proper care, though it would have presented significant challenges. What troubled Sarah Jenkins most, according to her daughter's testimony, was not the physical connection between the girls, but Dr. Blackwood's immediate response upon seeing them. He looked at them not with a father's dismay nor a physician's clinical interest, MJ recalled her mother saying, but with the expression of a man who has discovered something he has long sought, something unnatural. The transcript indicates that MJ provided additional details about Dr. Blackwood's subsequent behavior, but these portions were heavily redacted before the document was archived. The only legible phrase in this section reads, "He spoke often of balance and completion, of 4 parts making a perfect whole." Dr. Reynolds attempted to locate the original unredacted transcript, but discovered that all records of the interview had been expunged from the Virginia Medical Historical Society's archives. When she inquired about this discrepancy, she was informed that no such interview had ever been conducted. Dr. Reynolds' subsequent request to visit the Blackwood Preserve for research purposes was denied by county officials. In her field journal, discovered among her effects after her disappearance in 1969, she wrote, "Something or someone does not want this history examined too closely." In 1853, approximately 1 year after the discovery of Dr. Blackwood's journal, a traveling physician named Dr. Thomas Harper claimed to have encountered a medical anomaly while passing through a remote area of North Carolina. In a letter to a colleague at Harvard Medical School, Harper described being called to a secluded cabin to examine what the local residents called the joined ones. Upon arrival, he found 4 individuals arranged in what he termed a living circle, with surgical modifications that had created permanent connections between them. Harper's letter becomes increasingly agitated as he describes how the females, joined naturally at the spine, had been surgically connected to the males at the abdomen, creating a continuous circle of flesh. According to Harper, the 4 individuals, 2 females who appeared to be in their late teens and 2 males of similar age, were able to move only in coordinated patterns, as though they constituted a single organism with 4 semi-autonomous parts. Most disturbing was Harper's observation that while they could not speak, they seemed to communicate through synchronized movements and expressions that suggested a shared consciousness alongside individual awareness, a medical impossibility that nevertheless presented itself before my eyes. Harper claimed that the cabin's caretaker, an elderly man who refused to give his name, explained that the circle had been delivered to him 3 years earlier by a well-dressed gentleman who paid handsomely for their continued care and seclusion. The caretaker admitted to feeding and cleaning the joined individuals, but otherwise leaving them undisturbed in their specially constructed room, a circular chamber with no furniture, only a padded floor and walls. Harper's letter indicates his intention to return with colleagues to document this unprecedented medical phenomenon, but no record exists of any such follow-up visit. Indeed, when Harper's correspondence was discovered during a 1962 inventory of Harvard Medical School's historical archives, inquiries revealed that no physician named Thomas Harper had ever been affiliated with the institution, nor could any record of his medical license be located in any state. In 1857, a fire destroyed a remote cabin in western North Carolina, killing its elderly occupant and 4 others whose remains were too badly damaged for identification. The local coroner's report noted only that the 4 bodies were found in the center of the structure, arranged in a circular pattern that suggested they had been holding on to one another at the moment of death. No further investigation was conducted, and the remains were buried in unmarked graves on the property. The land where this cabin stood was purchased in 1960 by a private research foundation with apparent connections to the federal government. All records of the transaction were classified in 1962 under an executive order pertaining to national security. Satellite imagery from 1967 shows a small facility on the site, but by 1969 the area had been completely cleared and replanted with native forest, effectively erasing any evidence of human occupation. In 1885, a journal article published in the obscure Medical Curiosities Quarterly referenced an unusual case allegedly documented by Dr. Edwin Blackwood before his disappearance. The article, authored by someone using only the initials J.H., possibly James Harrison, Blackwood's former colleague, described a theoretical procedure for creating a unified circulatory system between multiple individuals that would result in shared physiological responses and potentially shared consciousness. The article was retracted from the journal's next issue, with editors claiming it had been published in error. All copies of the issue containing the article were recalled, though one is rumored to exist in a private collection. In 1964, a linguistics professor named Robert Williams published a paper analyzing what he called the quadruple speech pattern, a phenomenon he claimed to have recorded near the Blackwood Preserve. Williams theorized that this represented either a remarkable form of coordinated vocalization by four individuals or a singular entity with multiple speech centers. His paper was largely dismissed by the academic community, and Williams himself retracted his claims the following year, attributing the recording to equipment malfunction. He resigned his university position shortly thereafter and moved to Switzerland, where he reportedly refused to discuss his previous research until his death in 1968. The recording, which accompanied his published analysis, captured what appeared to be a single voice that, when analyzed spectrographically, revealed four distinct speech patterns perfectly synchronized. Perhaps the most convincing evidence that something of Dr. Blackwood's experiment might have survived comes from Sheriff Thomas Anderson, who served Millfield County from 1958 to 1968. While investigating alone near dusk, he claimed to have witnessed a figure, or rather what at first appeared to be a single figure, moving among the ruins of the East Wing Foundation. As Anderson approached, he realized he was observing not one person, but four beings, moving in perfect coordination, connected to one another in a way that defied natural anatomy. He described them as two females and two males, adults in physical development, but with faces that had never aged. Properly, frozen somehow between childhood and maturity. Most disturbingly, Anderson reported that the four turned to look at him simultaneously, revealing eyes that shared the same movement, the same focus, as though controlled by a single mind. Anderson claimed that when he called out to them, they retreated into the shadows with a movement like nothing human, not walking or running, but rolling forward in a coordinated tumble that maintained their circular connection. When he followed, he found only a freshly disturbed section of earth near the old foundation, as though something had recently burrowed underground. Anderson's statement was sealed by county officials and might have remained hidden indefinitely, if not for a clerk's error during a records digitization project in 1968. In a sworn statement provided to county officials just before his retirement, Anderson described responding to reports of trespassing at the Blackwood Preserve in the spring of 1965. The document was briefly accessible in the county's electronic archive before being removed. Several researchers claim to have downloaded copies before its deletion, though none have been willing to share these publicly, citing warnings from unspecified government agencies. In 1966, a geological survey of the Blackwood Preserve revealed a network of tunnels extending from the estate's foundation to several points throughout the property. These tunnels, approximately 5 feet in diameter, appear to have been excavated relatively recently, certainly within the previous 20 years. County records indicate that a full exploration was planned but subsequently cancelled without explanation. The entrances to these tunnels were sealed with concrete in 1967, ostensibly for public safety reasons. Between 1967 and 1969, 7 individuals who had been involved in various aspects of the Blackwood case research disappeared under mysterious circumstances. These included Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, whose field journal was found abandoned at the Millfield County Library; Richard Thompson, the developer who had discovered the lead container; Michael Collins, the graduate student who abandoned his dissertation; 2 county clerks who had handled the original Blackwood documents, and a married couple who had been seen taking photographs near the preserve. No trace of any of these individuals has ever been found, despite extensive investigations. The final documented incident related to the Blackwood case occurred in 1969, when Millfield County received an anonymous donation of $10,000 with the stipulation that the Blackwood Preserve remain undeveloped in perpetuity. The bank records indicate that the funds were transferred from a Swiss account opened in 1851, just months after Dr. Blackwood's disappearance. When bank officials attempted to trace the account's history, they discovered that regular deposits had been made every 10 years, with the most recent occurring in 1961. The source of these funds was never determined. A handwritten note accompanied the donation, reading simply, "The circle remains unbroken. Let us rest." Handwriting analysis conducted by the FBI concluded that the note matched samples of Dr. Edwin Blackwood's writing from the 1840s, an impossibility given that over 120 years had passed. The Bureau classified their full report, releasing only the conclusion that the similarity is likely coincidental or represents a deliberate forgery. Today, the Blackwood Preserve remains one of the least visited areas in the Virginia State Park system. Park rangers are instructed to prevent access after sunset, though they are not told specifically why this rule exists. According to internal Park Service memos, rangers who have conducted night patrols in the preserve have universally requested reassignment to other areas, citing uncomfortable atmospheric conditions and sounds that cannot be attributed to known wildlife. In 2002, an automated environmental monitoring station was installed near the center of the preserve as part of a statewide conservation initiative. The equipment functioned normally for approximately 6 months before beginning to transmit anomalous data. Sensors detected what appeared to be 4 distinct heartbeats occurring in perfect synchronization, always at the same location but at different times of night. When technicians investigated, they found the equipment undamaged but rearranged. The separate components had been carefully repositioned to form a perfect circle. The monitoring station was removed in 2003, and no further attempts have been made to place electronic equipment within the preserve boundaries. Satellite imaging of the area, conducted as part of various environmental studies, consistently shows an unexplained cold spot near the location of the original East Wing. This thermal anomaly persists regardless of season or weather conditions. In 2005, a team from the University of Virginia's Department of Anthropology requested permission to conduct ground-penetrating radar surveys of the preserve. Their stated purpose was to locate the unmarked graves believed to exist on the property. After initial approval, the project was abruptly cancelled when the team's lead researcher received an anonymous package containing a single page torn from what appeared to be Dr. Blackwood's journal. The page contained only one sentence, repeated multiple times in increasingly distorted handwriting. "What has been joined must not be found." The most recent reference to the Blackwood case appears in the private papers of Judge Caroline Harmon, who served on the Millfield County Court from 1990 to 2008. In a personal journal entry dated June 18, 2007, she wrote of being approached by an individual claiming knowledge of the Blackwood matter, who requested that the original documents be permanently sealed for the safety of all concerned. Judge Harmon's entry includes the disturbing observation that the visitor's movement seemed oddly coordinated, as though each limb was responding to multiple control inputs. She approved the request the following day and never mentioned the matter again in her writings. Perhaps it is best that the full truth of the Blackwood case remains buried in fragmented records and sealed archives. Some chapters of history defy complete understanding, existing at the boundary of documented fact and unbearable possibility. What is certain is that somewhere in those woods, in that protected space where development is forever prohibited, something remains. Something that breathes and moves and perhaps even thinks in ways that challenge our understanding of life, consciousness, and the natural order. For those who might still be drawn to the Blackwood Preserve, seeking answers or evidence, consider this final piece of information. Every person known to have visited the site alone after dark since 1969 has reported the same dream on the night following their visit, a dream of being simultaneously in 4 places, seeing through 4 pairs of eyes, feeling with 4 bodies, all while being unable to separate from a circle that has existed for over 170 years. The circle remains unbroken, and perhaps for the sake of those trapped within it, it is best that way. For what Dr. Edwin Blackwood joined together in 1850 may exist in a state beyond our conception of life or death, a perpetual unity that, if broken, might release something into the world that was never meant to exist at all.